We are now ready to fill our high relief areas in each of our design techniques. So each of our design techniques, we created this high relief frame, and we now need to fill only that frame on the engraving technique and on the low relief technique. So before we do any filling, we need to clean our pewter so that the beeswax or your polyfiller can properly adhere to the pewter. Using a cleaning medium like methylated spirits, I am spraying on a good amount into the curves, and then I wipe it down with a paper towel softly, and I've got my pewter lying on a cushion of my soft surface so that I've got the pewter supported properly when I work on it. So this is a soft motion, and I'm concentrating on the frame where I'm going to add the beeswax. Once I've done the cleaning, I am now ready to fill. So I've got my beeswax heated up in a cosmetic wax pot. I prefer using the wax pot because it is temperature controlled and it doesn't heat up the beeswax too high. It just keeps it nice and warm. So using my glass dropper, I add some beeswax to the dropper, and then you need to take your time when doing your filling. Slowly just pour the beeswax into the area while pulling away so that the beeswax can flow into your space. And then I have a little palette knife that is inside my beeswax pot. It is heated up with the beeswax, which I use to remove any spillage that I have before the beeswax are fully set. So this is still a little bit warm, so as soon as it's almost set, I take my spatula and I remove any excess beeswax that I have on my pewter. I return the beeswax that I remove immediately to my wax spot so that it can heat up again, and I clean up the area as needed. By doing it in this way, you have a lot less issues when cleaning up your pewter or your beeswax after it has set fully. So I do it immediately before it gets too cold. There we go, and I've got a nice clean edges, so I can move on to the other sides. Again, I'm going to use my warmed spatula and I'm going to remove the excess beeswax before it sets. I don't want to have any beeswax on the inside, because if I polish and patina and there's a little bit of beeswax here, it's going to leave a bump on my pewter which can destroy the whole design. So I want to keep the inside nice and clean. go. So that's the filling part done on the engraving design. So I can now set this aside so that it can cool down properly. We can now continue and we can fill our low relief frame. So on the low relief design, we only again need to fill the high relief frame that we added. So from the back, we first need to do our cleaning, and then we can continue with the filling part. So before we can continue filling our frame, we once again need to clean our pewter. So taking a bit of methylated spirits, I spray the area properly, concentrating on the frame, and then taking a paper towel, I wipe down and clean the recessed area that we need to fill. So it should be free of any lubrication before we can start filling with beeswax. Again, I have my pewter lying on my soft surface so that I have enough support. Okay, so once done, I'm again going to use my glass dropper and evenly apply some beeswax. That's the low relief frame, the high relief frame around the low relief done. So we can now move on to our high relief design, where we have a lot more filling to do because we need to fill the entire design that we lifted up from the front and then also the frame around. So on the back of our pewter, we need to apply again some methylated spirits to clean, and now we need to clean all of the high relief areas, not just the frame. Okay, so once that is clean, we can now start doing our filling. So when we fill bigger areas like this top part here, I first do one small layer throughout, and then I do another layer on top. I don't want to do too much of the warm beeswax at a time, because that will cause my pewter to warp as the beeswax cools down on the metal. So we want to do this slowly and tiny layers at a time. So heating up my glass dropper with some warm beeswax. So using the glass dropper, we can add a tiny layer of beeswax onto the entire design that we need to fill. So I'm not filling up to the top yet, I'm just applying one tiny layer of beeswax to the surface, just to make sure that my pewter doesn't warp because of the warm beeswax. And I do this as neatly as possible, trying not to go over the edges. then I've got one more little bit to do here. Then I can continue on with my frame. So that is the entire area filled with beeswax, and I just need to make sure that my surrounding area in the center of my design is nice and clean. So once your area is nice and clean on the inside and you've got no beeswax on the background of your design, we can now continue with our patina process. So if we turn our pewter back onto our hard surface, I normally do just one final check to see that everything is in order, and then I use my hands to flatten just the surrounding areas that might have lifted up while we did our filling.